The Brexiteers were absolutely desperate to do free trade deals. And just at the end of last year, they finally got their much vaunted first true proper free trade deals, not these continuity agreements, which they tried to sell as free trade deals when they really weren't. These deals were just agreements with places like Mexico, Canada, basically going, okay, we'll continue trading as is for the moment while we discuss a new trade deal. Is that okay? Excellent, good. And then, of course, it was sold as, oh my God, we've got a free trade deal with Canada. Couldn't be, of course, further from the truth when it comes to actually looking at what that is. But one of the things that was really worrying about, of course, the free trade deal with Australia, which we went through heavily at the time, was the fact that it is being signed and rushed through so quickly, because trade deals aren't just done in, from what we can at least tell, less than 6 months. That's not how long trade deals usually take. They normally take like 8 to at least 10 years. And this isn't somehow due down to the fact that we have or had, Liz Truss was an absolutely fantastic negotiator or anything like that. It was because of how desperate the UK was to try and prove that we could get, oh dear, pardon me, a free trade deal. And look how amazing it was. Benefit of Brexit, all that, ooh, 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 rah, rah. And of course, now, well, the more we look at the Australian trade deal, the worse we find its effects. And of course, one thing we've said before, when you sign a free trade deal, it's hard to get out of. You think, or at least if the Brexiteers think, getting out of the EU was hard. Wait until you see how hard it is to get out of some of this Australian trade deal stuff, especially when it is damaging our environmental and food standards. So today we're going to go over to the Byline Times to have a look at what a parliamentary report in the House of Lords said about this. But before we do that, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there is a link to my Patreon page and a one-off link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel that way. And of course, down below there is the YouTube subscription button, where if you subscribe to that, you get all sorts of little bells, whistles, and emojis. And of course, there's the YouTube thank you button as well. So over we go to the Byline Times with the title of "The Australian Free Trade Deal hampers UK on environmental and food standards," says parliamentary report. The UK's first free trade agreement, negotiated from scratch with Australia, was so rushed that environmental issues and protections for niche British products were overlooked, a report by peers has said today. The House of Lords of the International Agreements Committee says that the agreement is important as it both players as important is the agreement is important as it both paves the way for other agreements in the future and for our entry into the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, or the CTPP, a major government objective. The deal is estimated to add only about 0.08% in GDP by at least 2035. Raising quotas will phase in tariff-free imports. The deal will also mean Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, will have to liberalise immigration rules for Australians to come to the UK as part of the mutual agreement, which will allow British people and their families to work in Australia and allow young people up to the age of 35 to go there for 3 years. The former would be practically beneficial for lawyers who will be able to practice law in the UK and Australia, as for the professional qualifications will be mutually recognised. Other beneficiaries will be the financial and digital services, architects and car exporters. The report is highly critical of the speed of negotiations, which led to the environmental issues like the climate change being ignored. It will also allow the import of Australian beef from deforested land and has no section on Australia reducing dependence on coal and allowing import of crops for pesticides, which are banned in the EU and the UK, have been used. The deal is also bad news for producers like Cornish pasties. Cornish clotted cream and Scottish whisky, as there is no protection in Australian law, unlike when the UK was a member of the EU, against rival products using their name. The report also says that there are some instances where differences in production and animal welfare standards could lead to UK farmers competing on an unlevel playing field, particularly for Australian agri-food products using pesticides not permitted in the UK. On pesticides and fungicides, the report points out that Australia's canola oil and chickpeas are produced using insecticides and fungicides banned in the UK and are likely to be imported in larger volumes due to tariff reductions. The UK's right to renegotiate could also be constrained through decisions taken by the joint committee between the UK and Australia set up under the agreement. The report is most critical of the failure to tie the agreement to the UK's goals for climate change. The peers say it could. It could have pressed for more ambitious commitments on climate change, stronger enforcement provisions, and for an explicit reference to the Paris temperature goals. A lack of a tie-up of the trade policy with the UK's climate objectives is apparent. The recent change in government in Australia presents an opportunity to improve this environmental and climate change provisions, and in the agreement, we urge the government to do so through the Joint Committee. The report says there is also a risk this agreement could set a precedent for negotiations with other countries close to the UK market, particularly with other larger agricultural producers such as the US, Canada, Mexico, Argentina, and Brazil. The impacts of the UK-Australia agreement may therefore go well beyond this particular FTA. And when we were discussing, if you remember, discussing the agricultural, stuff around this, and you've got to remember, US, Canada, Mexico, Argentina, Brazil are massive agricultural importers. This will destroy our domestic production because all these other countries are looking at that deal and going, well, we want that as well. And they will ultimately probably have to give it up. Because once you sign and agree one thing with another country, under WTO rules, the bit of thing that the Brexiteers love to say, you actually have to, unless you have a free trade deal, you actually have to give that country that access as well. So there is a lot of questions to how much impact this will have for future free trade agreements going forward, and just how much damage this is going to do to our domestic food industry. So anyway, it continues. They were also critical that the government did not consult the devolved governments over the deal. Given the importance of the agriculture to Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales, it is essential that they are consulted from the onset, and through the negotiations, Parliament should be made aware of their views, it says. In Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK and the EU single market, the report says it is not clear whether Australia tariff-free goods will be able to enter Northern Ireland under the protocol. The report continues saying, the government has yet to actually articulate how the goods provisions in the Australian agreement will interact with the protocol on Northern Ireland Island. The response to the introductory report by the Lords Protocol on the Island/Northern Ireland subcommittee, the government acknowledged that there are, quote, elements of the protocol that are not benefiting Northern Ireland, and importers and consumers, particularly around the way in which the application of the EU tariffs on goods, quote, at risk entering the EU is determined. Peers recommended the report be debated in the Lords. So, once again, and we've said this before, I don't like the House of Lords, especially the way it is now. I think it's very, very undemocratic for a country that is meant to value, shall we say, democrat principles, and talked continuously about unelected bureaucrats having, shall we say, power over UK laws, when you've got the House of Lords sitting right there. But I will say this, I am glad that we had sort of the House of Lords, because ultimately Brexit is the only place, well, the House of Lords is the only place where Brexit is actually being discussed in an adult, sensible way, as you are seeing here. We're having reports published about the impacts of these free trade deals, the implications of what that free trade deal will mean for future free trade deal agreements. That's why the Australian deal is very, very worrying. The fact that we did it so quickly, the other countries are just going to say, we want that as well. And they're probably going to have to give in because we are quite a small economy when you compare to some of those big hitters we talked about earlier as well. And especially when we're looking at a cost of living crisis, you want, shall we say, good domestic production. And of course, we've got a situation where at the moment our government is saying, oh, don't be farmers, be wildlife, wardens instead. It's a quite bizarre situation, should we say, for farmers in the UK at the moment, especially with those clauses on, the tariffs. Once those, tariffs come down, 15 years' time, British farming is going to be an absolute state. Not that it already is an absolute state at the moment. Things are going to get infinitely worse because those tariffs is going to go boop, 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 boop. More stuff comes in from Australia. They will ultimately try and flood the market with cheap beef and lamb. Of course, they're going to do that. And we will probably get to experience the first time just how good life was when we were in the EU, when the EU was sort of quite protectionist about, stuff and companies and farmers being inside them, protecting them from being flooded by, cheap imports. So, yeah, that's certainly going to be a conversation which we will certainly be having in the future. Certainly, a lot of right wingers aren't going to be very happy. Well, they may be, depends, but certainly a lot of people who voted for Brexit aren't going to enjoy, shall we say, the consequences, as we've said before, of Brexit. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button on your way out. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and one donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel that way. And of course, down below, there is the YouTube subscription button where you get little bells and whistles when you subscribe to that. And of course, there is the YouTube thank you button as well. So thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel, even if you just do click the like and share button. So, as always, thanks for watching. We'll see you all next time.